Well, guys, it's now time for my Week 2 picks of the 2025 NFL season. As last week, I went 12-4, which was very nice to go at least 3/4 correct. Very nice indeed. But anyways, also after that, there is the current standings in the playoff stands of the season today. In the AFC, it's the Colts with the bye, with Steelers at Chargers, Raiders at Bills, Broncos at Bengals, and the NFC is Packers with the bye, with Vikings at Commanders, Eagles at Buccaneers, and Cardinals at 49ers. And my Super Bowl prediction right now is the Bills over the Buccaneers. Alright, so now let's get to my Week 2 picks. Starting off tonight, a huge matchup in the NFC, which unfortunately my first day of work tonight, so I probably won't be able to see the game, which sucks. As it's the Commanders at the Packers for the first time since 2021. As the Packers won the last two, the Commanders won the last one 2018, and they haven't won in Lambeau since 1988. As the Commanders are trying to go 2-0 for the first time since 2023, the Packers are also trying to go 2-0 for the first time since 2020, I believe. So the Commanders had kind of like a defensive effort against the Giants. Like, their offense didn't do that much, really. It's more like the Giants couldn't do anything. But they got the win. Meanwhile, the Packers, that was exactly why I picked the Packers. I had a feeling they were going to do it to the Lions, and boy did they. They whooped their ass with a really good defensive effort. As both teams right now have pretty good defenses. So maybe this will be a defensive game. But let's see about that. But I trust the Packers right now, so I'm going to go pick them. And then we get to the Sunday games. Start off with the Browns at the Ravens. As the Ravens won the last one, the Browns haven't beaten them since last year, and they haven't won in Baltimore since 2023. As the Browns try to avoid 0-2 for the first time since 2017, Ravens try to avoid 0-2 for a second year in a row. As, hey, this will be the first time Flacco returns to Baltimore after he was traded in 2019. It's crazy how long it took and how long he's lasted. So the Browns actually had probably up there as like one of the best defenses in the league after 1 week in. Number 2 in passing yards, total yards, and number 1 rush defense. Just insane how good effort they did against the Bengals, which, hey, I kind of warned you all they could do a good job, but in the end, they couldn't get the job done offensively to get the win done. The Ravens, meanwhile, kind of like how they were last year, one of the best offenses in the league, except for passing yards, but their defense is one of the worst in the league. Although, one game in, highest scoring game in the league, that's to be expected. But yeah, I'm going to pick the Ravens for this one. Hard choke that they did too against the Bills. Had a 15-point lead and you still blew it. And then we get to, I don't think it's going to be necessarily a big matchup, but record-wise it is in the AFC, as it's the Jaguars at the Bengals for the first time since 2021. Bengals won the last 3, the Jaguars haven't beaten them since 2019. As the Jaguars try to go 2-0 for the first time since 2018. And the Bengals try to go 2-0 for also the first time since 2018. So the Jaguars, they spanked the Panthers, but that's not really saying much. And they didn't look really that impressive other than defensively. But again, it's the Panthers. Nothing to be impressed about. Bengals, meanwhile, they won, but offensively, they didn't do that really good outside of like the first drive. You see, they're like second worst in every category other than points. Like, they were shut down pretty much. They got lucky they were able to win that one. So that's a little bit a confidence decline in my eyes. But they're going to be playing against the Jaguars. We'll see how well the Jaguars play, because they're going to need all they can to get this one. And that, I'm going to be picking the Bengals. And then it's the Giants at the Cowboys. As the Cowboys won the last 8, the Giants haven't beaten them since 2020. And they haven't won in Arlington since 2016. As the Giants try to avoid 0-2 for the third year in a row. The Cowboys are trying to avoid 0-2 for the first time since 2010. Giants, they got destroyed by the Commanders. Their offense was terrible. There's nothing else to say about that. Cowboys, hard-fought game, but they couldn't get it done in the end against the Eagles and such. And yeah, obviously I'm going to pick the Cowboys for this one. And then an NFC North matchup as it's the Bears at the Lions. As the Lions won the last 2, the Bears haven't beaten them since 2023, and they haven't won in Detroit since 2021. As the Bears are trying to avoid 0-2 for the first time since, God, I don't remember the last time they went 0-2. Meanwhile, the Lions are trying to avoid 0-2 for the first time since 2021. So the Bears, man, they played good first against the Vikings, and then they completely and utterly collapsed as Caleb Williams for most of the game was terrible. And yeah, that was not a good look. They choked against the Vikings. Very embarrassing loss. Speaking of embarrassing, I wouldn't say embarrassing. The Lions got embarrassed by the Packers. Even though I just said they shouldn't be embarrassed, but whatever. They did not play good. I had a feeling Like, that was the feeling I had going into that game, that the Lions are going to have trouble this year, especially with the tough schedule early on. And I was right to view. I mean, had that thought so far, as they did not play good offensively whatsoever. They were shut down. But now they got to play the Bears, who, remember, last year they almost beat them. If it wasn't for them, taking a timeout like they should have, maybe they could have. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears put up a hard-fought fight again like they did last Thanksgiving. But I'm going to pick the Lions for this one. And then it's the Patriots at the Dolphins, as the Dolphins won the last 4. The Patriots haven't beaten them since 2022, and they haven't won in Miami since 2019. As the Patriots try to avoid 0-2 for the first time since 2023, the Dolphins are trying to avoid 0-2 for the first time since 2019. No, 2020. So the Patriots, Drake May did not do a really good job as they lost to the Raiders. Meanwhile, the Dolphins, oh my goodness! I'm not surprised they lost to the Colts, but the way they lost was absolutely stunning. Literally everything about that team was horrible in week 1. Just horrible. Every single category was shocking how they lost to the Colts that badly. Oh boy. But they're at home against a team they haven't lost to in years, especially at home. So I'm still going to pick the Dolphins. But man, that was really an eye-opening loss how badly they played. Alright, then it's the 49ers at the Saints for the first time since 2020. As the 49ers won the last one, the Saints haven't beaten them since 2020. And the 49ers haven't won in New Orleans since 2019. As the 49ers are trying to go 2-0 for the first time since 2023. Saints are trying to avoid 0-2 for the first time since 2017. As the 49ers, Brock Purdy might potentially not even play this week, I heard, because he got injured, and he didn't really play that good against the Seahawks, even though he did make the comeback touchdown in the end. Kind of a little bit of a concern how he played. The Saints, meanwhile, nothing really impressive to say about their game against the Cardinals, other than, hey, it was at least close, but that's not saying much. But honestly, even if Purdy doesn't play, I don't even know who their backup is. I think the 49ers are going to get this one, even if Purdy doesn't play. But hey, with a backup in, you never know. Alright, then it's the Bills at the Chiefs. Bills at the Jets. As the Bills won the last 3, the Jets haven't beaten them since 2023. As the Bills are trying to go 2-0 for the second year in a row, the Jets are trying to avoid 0-2 for the first time since 2021. As the Bills, one of the best offense in the league, but just like the Ravens, one of the worst defense in the league. When you have a 41-40 victory, it's not surprising one week in, as they had to pull off a big comeback against the Ravens. Meanwhile, the Jets actually had a pretty impressive game against the Steelers. Justin Fields actually played pretty good, but in the end, they couldn't get the job done. Now they're going to have to play a team that, hey, the last 3 years, the Jets are 2-1 when they host the Bills, and last year they almost pulled it off again, remember? So, don't think the Bills should underestimate the Jets. This could be interesting. This could be a high-scoring game if the Jets show up once again. But I'm just going to be safe and pick the Bills. I still don't know if I could fully trust Justin Fields. Alright, then NFC matchup. Our conference matchup, as it's the Seahawks at the Steelers for the first time since 2021. As the Steelers won the last 2, the Seahawks haven't beaten them since 2019. Funny enough, that game was also in week 2 as well. As the Seahawks are trying to avoid 0-2 for the first time since 2018, Steelers are trying to go 2-0 for the second year in a row. As the Seahawks, yeah, that game went about as expected as I thought the Seahawks were going to play this year. Their offense sucked. Sam Darnold did not play good and had that hilarious fumble at the end of the game that cost them. Meanwhile, the Steelers, with Aaron Rodgers, they had to put up a hard-fought fight to beat the Jets. But hey, Aaron Rodgers got the victory, and he looked like his former MVP self with 4 touchdowns. Very good job, and I'm obviously going to pick the Steelers for this one. Alright, then it's the Rams at the Titans for the first time since 2017. The Titans won the last one. The Rams haven't beaten them since 2017, and the Titans haven't won at home against them since 2009. As the Rams are trying to go 2-0 for the first time since 2021, and the Titans are trying to avoid 0-2 for the second year in a row. So the Rams, offensively, it wasn't their impressive performance against the Texans, but their defense, oh my god. Just like how they were at the end of the year last year, their defense was completely elite, and it was a beautiful sight to see and such. Meanwhile, the Titans, not surprised they choked against the Broncos. That game was definitely winnable of one of the worst offenses in the league. Cam Ward did not play good at all in his first debut. Oh boy. And now they're going to go up against another playoff team who had an elite defense so far this year. So we'll see how they do, but I'm obviously going to pick the Rams for this one. Alright, then we get to the 4 p.m. games. Starting off with the Panthers at the Cardinals for the first time since 2021, I believe. As the Cardinals won the last one, the Panthers haven't beaten them since 2022, and they haven't won in Glendale since 2013. As the Panthers are trying to avoid 0-2 for the 4th year in a row. The Cardinals are trying to go 2-0 for the first time since 2021. So the Panthers, Bryce Young looked as terrible as he's been throughout his career. He better turn around if he wants to have any chance. He's not going to have probably another chance if he plays like how he did last year's stuff here. Meanwhile, the Cardinals, hard-fought game against the Saints, but they got the win, and that's all that matters. And yeah, I'm going to pick the Cardinals for this one. I don't have any faith in the Panthers, but we'll see. And then it's a big AFC matchup at the moment, as it's the Broncos at the Colts for the first time since 2019. The Broncos won the last one. The Colts haven't beaten them since 2022, and they haven't won at home against the Broncos since 2019. As the Colts are trying to go 2-0 for the first time since 2009, Broncos are trying to go 2-0 for the first time since 2018. As the Broncos, they have one of the league's best defense at the moment, but they did not play good at all against the Titans. Bo Nix looked terrible, and they really got bailed out and such. They did not look good whatsoever. The Colts, meanwhile, holy shit. Like I said earlier, I'm not surprised they beat the Dolphins. I am stunned how they did it. All around, offense and defense. Just a complete annihilation of the Dolphins. And Daniel Jones actually looked good. Now, was that a question? Now, was it the Colts actually being good, or was it the Dolphins were just so horrendous that the Colts just took advantage of it? We're going to have to wait and see, because now they're going to have to play a playoff team, although they're kind of limping in after the Titans game. Very big concerns in that regard. This game could go either way, but after seeing how they did in Week 1, I'm actually going to take my chances, and I'm going to pick the Colts for this one. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos turn around, or the Colts show that last week's game was just a fluke, and the Broncos win. But I'm going to pick the Colts still. And then we get to our Super Bowl rematch already in Week 2, as it's the Eagles at the Chiefs for the first time since 2023. The Eagles won the last one. The Chiefs haven't beaten them since 2021, and they haven't won at home against the Eagles since 2017. As the Eagles try to go 2-0 for the first time since 2023, the Chiefs are trying to avoid 0-2 for the first time since 2014. So the Eagles, hard-fought game against the Cowboys that they need that win. And Jalen Carter, please try not to cause trouble for yourself again, as he's going to be needed in this game, as we're going to go up against the Chiefs, who I don't think they played really well against the Chargers. Sure, it was a close game, but they really did not play that well, especially defensively. And Mahomes still doesn't seem like his former self from like 2022 to 2018 and such. Definitely a big concern. And of course, we saw what happened when the Eagles played Chiefs in the Super Bowl when they whooped their ass. And right now, I think the Eagles got their number, so I'm going to pick the Eagles for this one. And then we get to Sunday night, as it's the Falcons at the Vikings for the second year in a row. The Vikings won the last two. The Falcons haven't beaten them since 2020. As the Falcons are trying to avoid 0-2 for the first time since 2021, I believe. Meanwhile, the Vikings are trying to go 2-0 for the second year in a row. So the Falcons, they had a hard-fought game against the Buccaneers. Michael Penix played really well. They just couldn't win in the end. They would have tied it up if their kicker didn't miss a field goal. Nothing else you could do about it. It was just a hard-fought game that they just didn't go their way. The Vikings, meanwhile, oh boy, J.J. McCarthy's first game, and most of the game, the Vikings were dog shit. They were getting manhandled by the Bears. But then the fourth quarter, McCarthy showed up and put up 3 total touchdowns to get the victory. A huge victory right there. But will it last, though? Oh boy, this could maybe be a high-scoring game and all that. But for right now, I think I'll put my faith in the Vikings. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons pull it off in the end, although they did get destroyed last year, remember. Alright, then we get to the 2 Monday night games. Thankfully, the NFL was right to, have them at separate times and such. As starting off with the Buccaneers at the Texans for the first time since 2023. As the Texans won the last 5, the Buccaneers have only beaten them 1 time back in 2003, and they've never won in Houston. As the Buccaneers, although their stats don't look impressive, Baker Mayfield still looked really good. They got the needed victory over the Falcons, which was a huge win in that regard. As the Texans, oh God, I think the Texans Ram game was the most viewed game of my 4 p.m. games on the list, and oh dear God, the Texans offense was putrid. Oh my goodness, just absolutely terrible. Looking like how bad they were last year at the end of the year so far. And yeah, right now I'm gonna pick the Buccaneers for this one. And then we're going to wrap up with a big AFC West matchup with the number 1 seed on the division on the line, as it's the Chargers at the Raiders. The Chargers won the last 2. The Raiders haven't beaten them since 2023. So the Chargers are trying to go 2-0 for the second year in a row. The Raiders are trying to go 2-0 for the first time since 2021. So the Chargers had a very impressive game against the Chiefs. And for the first time, really, in a couple years, Justin Herbert actually looked really good with those free touchdowns. Really good offensive performance, although their defense, so far one game in, not that very impressive compared to last year. The Raiders, meanwhile, impressive victory against the Patriots, but that was like one of the worst teams in the league. Now you got to go up against a playoff team from the previous year. This actually could be very interesting. The Raiders put up good fights against the Chargers usually if they're at least somewhat competent. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders get this. That would be very surprising if they start off 2-0. But I'm still going to pick the Chargers for this one. But I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, if the Raiders get. That's a big game to wrap up the week. So those are my picks for week 2. I hope to look forward to seeing Commanders and Packers. But like I said, my first day of the job is tonight. So I don't even know if I'm going to be able to watch any of it. But anyways, my picks, of course, are the Packers over the Commanders, the Ravens over the Browns, the Bengals over the Jaguars, the Cowboys over the Giants, the Lions over the Bears, the Dolphins over the Patriots, the 49ers over the Saints, the Bills over the Jets, the Steelers over the Seahawks, the Rams over the Titans, the Cardinals over the Panthers, the Colts over the Broncos, the Eagles over the Chiefs, the Vikings over the Falcons, the Buccaneers over the Texans, and the Chargers over the Raiders. Alright, so those are my picks. See you all next time for my Week 3 picks.